all so much for joining us for another Lead Now conversation on racism. Hello and welcome. My name is Lenora Oeters. I'm an alumna of Tri Delta Zeta chapter at the University of Cincinnati, and I have the honor and privilege of serving on Tri Delta's executive board. I have a super special guest with me today, my fellow executive board director, Tycely Williams, an alumna of our Gamma Kappa chapter at Wake Forest. So welcome, Tycely. Super excited to dive into this conversation together today.
Lenora, thank you for having me. It's so awkward to know whether I smile. We're going to dive into some really serious topics, but before we shift into the seriousness, I want to underscore my excitement. So it is a pleasure to be here with you. This is one of my official roles as an executive member of the board. So I'm just super excited.
Yes, me too, especially. And I know we had our first board meeting just this past weekend, so it was great to begin to dig in and get to work with you. You have recently been installed as Tri Delta's executive board director. So what excites you the most about joining the board and beginning this really important and critical work over the next biennium?
Well, there are many reasons why I'm excited, Lenora. I will begin by sharing that I am celebrating my 25th year as a Tri Delta sister. So I joined Tri Delta in 1995, and it is a wonderful way to commemorate what has been just a lifelong experience grounded in genuine friendships. So I'm really excited to be here at this moment in my Tri Delta journey. And I'll say, Lenora, that excitement is also bookended with something you've been very involved with something that definitely resonates with my personal values. And that's the sentiments and the actions that we will drive within Lead Now. So I am just so incredibly proud of the collective commitment that we're making. And I'm just really honored as a Black woman to bring my lived experiences and to create space for us to grow and continue to be brave, bold, and kind.
That's awesome. Well, it's just been a pleasure and privilege of mine just getting to know you in one-on-one conversations. And then, like I said, this past weekend at our board meeting, we're just thrilled to have your knowledge, experience, and spirit on our board team and really leading the fraternity's work. So before we dive into Lead Now and some of the good work we're doing there, I want our viewers and listeners to get to know a little bit more about you and your background and career. So this is an area we have in common. We're both fundraisers by trade. So you currently serve as the Chief Development Officer for America's Promise Alliance, which is the driving force behind a nationwide movement to improve the lives and futures of America's youth. So tell us a little bit more about what you do during your day job.
Absolutely. So, Lenora, we have a lot in common. We are both Chief Inspiration Officers, and when you work within the not-for-profit sector, no matter what title you carry, you're an external ambassador, and your role is to excite people about your mission, to speak to its importance. So I currently have the privilege of representing about 450 plus youth serving organizations. And so we are a network, a collective leadership platform that works to create positive conditions for young people. And we place a lot of emphasis on those young people who are traditionally overlooked and underserved.
Wow, just such critically important work always for our country and our nation, but especially right now. So thank you for all that you are doing to lead this charge. I think in hearing more about your professional experience and then getting to know you, servant leadership is just through and through in your DNA and has always been a part of your professional career and your volunteer work as well. So why do you think that this has been so prominent in your life? Why is serving the community such an important part of how and who you are when you show up in the world?
Absolutely. And it's an important reason why I was drawn to Tri Delta. And I think for many of us, it's because these values were introduced to me at a very young age. My father was a principal, my mother was a school teacher, and I grew up in the Deep South in an area where children were protected, where children were affirmed and loved. And with that came also the responsibility of knowing that even as a young person, if there was opportunity to benefit the community, whether it was picking up litter on the way, walking to the store, or helping with the lemonade stand to raise money for charity, that you would find a way to use your strengths to benefit others and to enrich the community. And so it's always been something, Lenora, that's just brought me a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction. And during these times especially that just feels so heavy and so hard, I'm really grateful that I'm able to lean into my professional commitments and pull a lot of hope, leave with a lot of satisfaction, and to feel as if that I've done something purposeful with the day.
I love that. I love that. And I love what you said, especially right now. So, how do you think that we as Tri Delta can do a better job at this critically important time in our nation and country's history? How can we do a better job of showing up as brave, bold, and kind leaders?
Yeah. So, Lenora, I'm going to start just centering this on friendship and sisterhood. And I am active and engaged in many organizations, but this is the only door that I can walk in and meet a sister. And so I think we start by steadfastly loving one another. And that's more than just a motto, right? That's recognizing that we are all experiencing, either directly or indirectly, just significant signs of trauma, significant stress and strain with all that is unusual in our world. And so I think we need to start by recognizing that it's important to love on one another. And with that, Lenora, I think it's important to step into situations knowing that even though we are sisters and even though we are tied by a common purpose and values, that we all have varied experiences. And what may be acceptable to you may be unacceptable to me. So when we step into the shared community, we have to create space and grace to learn from one another. And so I just think as we look through how we go about actualizing LEAD now, we begin by recognizing what an identity is and how many different identities rest within each of us as human beings. And once we recognize that there's more to you than my assumption, there's more to you than my previously held stereotype, which stems from bias, which we all carry the baggage of bias. Once I recognize that I have a unique opportunity within a friendship and within the sisterhood to learn just as much as I do in a classroom, to learn just as much as I do researching social science, to learn just as much as I do when I go to work, then I think, Lenora, we're really able to maximize the value and the true diversity that exists within Tri Delta.
I love that. I love that. And I think that I love what you said so beautifully, which is creating that space and grace for each other with that constant underpinning of our friendship in Tri Delta and allowing each other to learn and grow through our experiences together, to seek understanding, to listen, and to support as we all go through this experience together. So, I guess too, I would love for our listeners to hear some more about your membership experience at Wake Forest. I know the first time we talked, you had a great scrapbook that you shared with me of pictures from your collegiate years, shoulder pads and all, but just tell us a little bit about what it was like joining Tri Delta at Wake Forest, what drew you to the chapter, and what made you really want to continue to stay connected with Tri Delta across all these years.
Absolutely. So it seems like the early 90s, Lenora, was so long ago. And I look back on those years with such pride. Because my sisters at Wake were woke white women way before we knew anything about being woke. And I say that because it's also important for us to drive for change while simultaneously celebrating where we have already seen success, and to learn from those cultures and those environments how we replicate and scale that type of success. So, I begin by saying Wake Forest is a very small collegiate campus, and everybody kind of knows everybody. And with that, you were introduced early on to the stereotypes, right? And I remember as a freshman thinking, I'm not sure if Greek life is for me. Neither of my parents were members of fraternities or sororities. And I wanted, like most college students, I was really looking for a sense of belonging, but just not sure if that was the pathway for me. But I remained open. And I always admired the Tri-Delts because they were smart. They were very kind. They seemed to speak to everyone, and they weren't necessarily individuals that were concerned about cliques. And they just seem to be very, I'm going to use the word in a positive way. They seem to just be very normal, well-rounded women that any and everybody would want to befriend, and any and everybody would be privileged to be a part of. And that was something that I was really, really drawn to. As we know, recruitment, this is a selective process. Even though I was drawn to Tri Delta, I didn't know if Tri Delta would be drawn to me. And so I was so incredibly excited to go through the formal process, to receive the invitation. And I will say, Lenora, I was not the first woman of color to join the Gamma Kappa chapter at Wake Forest, which was also just very affirming for me, because it said, you don't have to necessarily step into an environment as the only or the first.
Right.
And so I have had just a very positive experience with Tri Delta from day one. I tell this story often, really as a way to demonstrate that my Tri Delta sisters felt that, Black was and is beautiful eons ago. So at Wake, we have a process like many college campuses where you go through and you identify who's going to be the representative for the homecoming court. And this was, back in the early 90s, a really big deal. I don't know if it's still a big deal now, but back then it was a really big deal. And I remember sitting around and we were all talking about, who are we going to nominate and who's going to be the Tri Delta nomination for homecoming court. And I was just very, very pleased to hear my sisters put forth reason and rationale behind why they wanted to nominate Tycely. And I've always, growing up in the Deep South in Birmingham, Alabama, I've known that within white dominant culture, people have different perspectives on what is beautiful. And rarely do you see white women turning to a Black woman to say, I recognize and see your beauty. But my sisters did that at a very young age for me. And whether it was homecoming court, here's something, Lenora, you may not know, whether it was my preliminary competition with the Miss America pageant,
Ooh.
My sorority sisters, have been there through every pivotal moment of my life, literally,
Yeah.
from graduation from college to my wedding, to excitement over thinking I'm having a child, to the disappointment of learning that I'm not, to divorce, to starting my business, and even just as, a few weekends ago with installation on the executive office board. So I have had just a very positive experience. And I'm here, Lenora, to do all that I can to ensure that every woman within Tri Delta has a positive experience, and to also ensure that the unique needs of our sisters who are Black and Indigenous and our sisters of color, that we center those and do the very best to solve for whatever unmet need exists within that collection of our sisters, because by doing that, we will be on a path to ensure that we're meeting everyone's needs.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those stories and pieces of your collegiate Tri Delta experience. You're right, those women were smart in recognizing what was so special and beautiful and valuable about you, and getting to know you, inside and out. You are just such a wonderful part of Tri Delta, and we are lucky to have you as one of our sisters. So thank you for sharing those stories and some more about your experience. I do want to talk a little bit about what you said at the end, because we had a chance to dive into this during our board meeting, just talking about our Black, Indigenous, and sisters of color. And we had a lot of conversations around barriers to membership in Tri Delta, and especially for first generation students and for our sisters of color. So how do you think we continue to work as individuals and as a Tri Delta collective to really dismantle those barriers and work to become more welcoming and inclusive to this amazing group of potential members?
Absolutely. So it reverts back to, Lenora, to what we started talking about, and that is, all of us are born into families. Mm-hmm. All of us are born into homes. All of us are taught and we're conditioned, and those beliefs influence the way that we behave. And in some instances, individuals have either not been born to family situations or communities where they've had exposure to people who look different, who are different, and or they may not necessarily value individuals who are different from a racial and cultural perspective.
Yeah.
I think regardless of the reason, once we look at our shared tie, we are and should do the very best that we can to ensure that within our sisterhood that we are creating what I'm going to consider to be equal treatment, equitable practices, really intentional about fairness, because it can be very, very easy, even within the construct of a well-intentioned sisterhood, to rely on networks that you have, to rely on your individual comfort. It's really hard, Lenora, as you know, leading diverse teams and being a part of a diverse community, because that means that you have to be adaptable, you've got to be flexible, you've got to be willing to revisit and constantly and consistently reshape the way you've been doing things. And so I think we've got some exciting opportunities before us, and we have exciting opportunities to model to other communities on college campuses, to model to other communities within cities when they're looking at our alumni chapters. We have the opportunity to model how we can create better conditions for people, period. Yeah. And so I look at a lot of the systemic change that we try to drive at America's Promise Alliance, and it's so similar to where we are within Tri Delta. It is just anti-isms, right? I mean, there's so many isms. It's racism, it's sexism, it's ageism, and whatever hatred or whatever bigotry that ties that, it's a necessity for us to address it and to ensure that the practices and the procedures and the policies that dictate the way that our organization works, that those are creating spaces that are fair and equitable to all of our sisters. And I think Lead Now is perfectly positioned to do that. As we've been talking, there's a lot of work that we will need to direct immediate attention to, which I'm really excited about the direction that we're moving in. And I'm excited for our sisters to hear more about the vision that's being cast. But I have a lot of confidence in our abilities, and I am excited to see how we continue to push and press forward for progress.
That's awesome. I love what you said about really Tri-Delta being that model, right? Not just within our Greek systems on our college campuses, but for the campuses and communities in which we live and serve. I think that's a way that Tri-Delta has always shown up in our world, and a new challenge and opportunity for us moving forward, to your point, to create those spaces that are fair and equitable for the next generation and future Tri-Delta members. So you had a perfect segue there to what I wanted to talk about next, which is our Lead Now action plan. And that's actually how you and I first had a chance to connect, was as part of our conversations prior to us publicly putting out the plan. You and I had a really good chat about the Lead Now action plan and asking for your thoughts and feedback and engaging in that meaningful conversation. So from that conversation to installation and getting up to speed as a director in your first board meeting, you know, how do you feel that the conversations that led up to the creation of the action plan have really helped to set us make improvements in Tri-Delta, centered around some of the work and the priorities that we outlined in the Lead Now action plan?
Well, you and our other sisters who have been involved in this effort, and I wish I could call every sister by name, because it's so important to recognize that there are women behind this systemic change that we're driving. But I think that there are the framework. What I really like about the elements of Lead Now, Lenora, is that we seem to have a great deal of specificity already attached to what will be outputs that will bring about not just incremental change, but that's designed to bring about immediate transformative change. So it's literally taking us from step 1 to step 99, because you and others have been really intentional in thinking through what types of change needs to take place. And what I am really inspired by is that we are resourcing that change, not only with financial revenue, but we're also resourcing things from a human resource perspective, which I think is equally significant and equally important. And so I look at the different dynamics, I should say I look at the different components of Lead Now. And Lenora, I have just, there's some pieces of it that really excite me, and most of that is around the relationship building that we are trying to intentionally do with communities that we have not traditionally developed relationships with. And so I'm really excited to see not only how we are going to create a more welcoming environment through recruitment, to ensure that once Black and Indigenous sisters join, that they feel welcomed and that they don't feel as if that they have been selected as a token, but they feel as if that they have access to the same rights and responsibilities that any other sister would have. But I'm equally excited, Lenora, about the possibilities that exist as it pertains to institutional relationships that I think we're going to be really intentional in trying to create beyond the construct of Tri-Delta. And so I'm really excited to see what will come with in PHC. Excited to see what's to come with Divine 9. We have a shared interest in believing that the Greek experience is one that not only adds value to our members, but it adds value to our universities, it adds value to our communities, and it adds value to the world as a whole. And so I'm really excited to see how we are able to forge new relationships, new partnerships, to grow and to also ensure that the work and the outcomes are bigger and better.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about, really us being all in for that immediate yet transformational change. And I think it's something that we know will continue and take time, but we are actively and aggressively working, like you said at the top, to really not only have this be a part of the Lead Now plan, but really woven through every piece of TriDelta's strategic plan and vision for our organization moving forward. So it's been great to have you as a partner in that work and having your knowledge and your experience to add to that conversation. I just appreciate what you will continue to add in creating change in TriDelta for the future. I know you talked about your professional work and how much of that is and has been focused with younger generations. I know you had a chance, you were tuned in to TriDelta's convention, so was I, and you and I both talked about, you actually sent me an email right afterwards about how encouraged and inspired you were in the conversation that happened around Lead Now, and especially the way that our collegiate members showed up and had so much knowledge and passion and pride around the plan and the work that needed to be done. So, in your head, how do you think that this next generation, this future generation, is going to change TriDelta?
I think they're already changing TriDelta. And I think that our collegiate members are changing TriDelta for the better. I mean, they are taking brave, bold, and kind to a whole new level. And so I am so proud of the way that they are activating courage, because it takes courage, right, to be brave enough to step forward and to challenge the status quo. It takes an element of tenacity to step forward with bold ideas to say, hey, we may have a better way of doing this. And I've been so incredibly impressed with the element and the tone, right? They've challenged in a way that has been respectful. They've challenged in a way that has been kind. It's assumed positive intent, but it has also been very clear about what the intended outcome is, which is a better experience for all TriDeltas. Because when you're able to demonstrate that you care about Black and Indigenous sisters of color, you are demonstrating a true commitment to our principles. And what we don't want to do is to be accused of being hypocritical or accused of not trying to actualize our principles through our practices. And so it's been great to see the way we've been called out on the carpet. And it's been great to see that not only have we been challenged, but we've also had tangible recommendations and suggestions that have been brought forward. And so I really appreciate the manner in which young people and our young sisters in particular are speaking up and speaking out. And it was also great at convention to see sisters of all generation literally using their words, using the chat box to demonstrate their support of the brave, bold, and kind leadership that we saw from our collegiates. So I'm just inspired. I can't wait to see where we will be 25 years from today, Lenora. So 2020, I'm sitting here like, ooh, I can't wait to see where TriDelta will be in 2045. Like it seems like it's a long way away, but I'm hopeful that there will be a collegian member looking back on her silver circle 25 years, and she will be able to speak to the positive transformational change that we've made within Tri Delta.
I love that. I love that. And I think to your point, I mean, all of our members, the way that we've engaged in conversations with that courage and that tenacity that you spoke about, as well as, really kindly challenging what we've done in the past and where we need to go. It's what we want and what we need from our members in order to push and move us forward. And so as we're navigating, whether it's our own personal journeys, or maybe you're a leader in your collegiate or alumni chapter, even us on the executive board or as a Tri Delta staff member, we're all on this learning journey together. And we don't always do things perfectly, right? We're not perfect people and we make mistakes. And so how do you think, through your experiences, how do we turn maybe those mistakes or missteps when we're having this conversation around racism or Lead Now or the action that Tri Delta needs to take? How do we take those mistakes and turn those into learning opportunities so that we all can continue on our personal path moving forward?
I would encourage all of us to center our purpose. And Lenora, I was really intentional about making sure that I knew our purpose, and I'm working to commit this to memory so that it is literally and figuratively at the core of my decision making. But what was interesting about looking at our purpose, we are attempting to create a perpetual bond of friendship. Mm-hmm. And we are working to develop a stronger and more womanly character. We exist to broaden moral and intellectual life and to assist members in every possible way. And so as we find ourselves in just really challenging times, and I use the word challenging because it's heartbreaking to see what continues to unfold for Black people in America. So we're right here watching another unfortunate incident with Jacob Blake and all that's unfolding in Wisconsin. And you don't have to be a Tri Delta in Wisconsin to feel what is happening and to feel the hurt and to feel the uncertainty and to feel the fear and to feel anger and all of those rightful emotions. And so I say we step forward with recognition that people are feeling things. Yeah. And the feelings vary. Someone may be feeling sad and distraught and depressed, and someone else may be feeling hopeful and optimistic because finally some type of change may be coming. Yeah. But I think we have to first start with the recognition that within our sisterhood, it is important for us to recognize and to ask and to care about our sisters' feelings. I think when we can demonstrate care and concern for one another's feelings, and I think by having the types of conversations you are having today, where we listen to understand, we then find ourselves in a place where through listening to how they feel, we have a better understanding of how we can contribute to giving them what they deem appropriate as they process through what they're feeling. Yeah. Because in some instances, Lenora, people aren't looking to feel better. They're looking to feel rightful feeling that comes as a result of a disappointment. Yeah. And so I think we have to realize and recognize that we're not here to put on our capes and pearls and to pick up our trident and to save people. Yeah. We are here to assist in every way possible as our sisters deem appropriate. And so we've got to make sure that we're continuing to recognize the individual power of our sisters and to accept that sometimes a sister may be experiencing something and she doesn't want to talk.
Yeah.
Or maybe the sister is experiencing something and she doesn't want you to fix it.
Yeah.
Or maybe a sister is experiencing something that she recognizes that you two are not able to erase. And so I think, Lenora, that we just move forward with the recognition that we are here to be a source of support.
Yeah. I really love that, because I think it's, to your point, it's all rooted and it's all there in our purpose. And it's all about showing up for our sisters, listening to them, continuing this learning journey, figuring out how we can use our individual strengths and power that we have, or influences in the community, to go about creating that change. And so as our members tune into these conversations, and I know so many of our women are digging into books and resources and other podcasts and articles, because people are just hungry to continue to learn. It's just really beautiful and inspiring to hear. So, are there other things that you felt have been helpful to you, or maybe resources? I know you've given us in TriDelta some ideas for ways that we can continue to learn and grow in this experience, and be a part of the conversation, and to be a listening ear, and to create that change. But is there anything else that you would offer to our listeners as ways that they can continue to grow and develop, so that they can be a part of creating that change for the future?
So, Lenora, I'll say, in the spirit of inclusiveness, I encourage all of our sisters to step outside of our comfort, to give ourselves permission to activate the same type of courage and tenacity and kindness that we've seen our collegiate sisters activate with introducing Lead Now. But I just encourage us to step outside of our comfort level so that we can process through what it is we're feeling. And I think so many times as TriDeltas, we are always there for everyone else. When you look at the word community, Lenora, and you spell it out, like picking up that crayon, right, and literally writing it out on the sidewalk, you see the word unity, but you also see nestled in there an I, right? Me. And I think that we have to also recognize that while there's lots unfolding in the world, it is okay to be our own ambassador. It's okay to be our own advocate. It's okay to be our own source of support before we even turn to someone else. And so I think, Lenora, one of the best ways we show up for other people is to show up for ourselves, because we know what we need in order to be healthy, in order to be whole, in order to be that source of support, right? For our sisters, for our chapters, for our families. And I think as women who are all stars, and I know every TriDelta is just that, we have become masterful at multitasking, going above and beyond, earning the gold star. We're A+++++. So I just encourage us, Lenora, just to take a break. And to focus on what we need, and to recognize that self-preservation is not a demonstration of weakness.
I love that. I think we all need that permission sometimes, right? To take a minute for ourselves, so that we can regain our own strength, so that we can continue to help and show up for others in our community, in our circles, and in our world. So I love that you ended us today with that note. Tycely, it has been such a pleasure to get to know you from that initial conversation through to now. And I'm just so excited that this is just the beginning of our journey, of our friendship in TriDelta, of our leadership in TriDelta, and really am in awe of your unselfish leadership, your dedication to our fraternity and to making it better for the Tri Deltas that will come after us. So thank you so much for your leadership. But before we go, I know folks are going to want to find you. So tell our listeners, how can they find you? Do you have, I know you're on Instagram, but how do you prefer people find you?
Absolutely. So I'm encouraging all of our sisters that are on college campuses, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I, like Lenora, am a matchmaker, and so I want to hear more about what you'd like to do beyond the walls of your university, and want to do all that I can to connect you to careers that are going to bring you infinite joy and happiness. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. I want to also encourage you to connect with me on Instagram and on Twitter, and it's just my first name, Tycely. And, in case, in the spirit of inclusiveness, Lenora, I have to also say that, 25 years I am on Facebook, not as active. But they can also find me on Facebook. So I look forward to it. And I'm also, Lenora, just open to, once things are in a different state, good old face-to-face interaction and exchanges. So once things lift and people find themselves in the District of Columbia, certainly open to coffee.
Well, I know that we all look forward to that, to being able to be together and share a cup of coffee and have a great conversation with you. And Tycely, thank you again for all you're bringing to Tri Delta, and will continue to give of yourself to better our organization. It's a privilege to serve alongside of you. So thank you so much for this great conversation today.
Lenora, per usual, you have been wonderful. I, too, on behalf of our fraternity, I want to thank you for all that you do for Tri Delta. We remain equally as proud of you. So thank you.
Thanks.